My producer Phil does a phenomenal job of singing this song.
Burning bright.
I hold to the rights that we fight for each night. I'm a constitutionalist through and through. Proud of this nation, the home of the true. Values that bind us from sea to shining sea. Family, faith, and the land of the free. Hearts full of grit with a spirit that's real. Living the legacy of...
This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, coming to you live from the podcast layer. Thrilled to be here, folks. I'm excited. We have a big anniversary coming up for the birth of our nation, the 250th. Can you hear the Liberty Bell ringing?
Ding.
I can definitely hear it. Freedom speaks to me. Liberty speaks to me. And I think that this is a great opportunity to learn more about our country. If you were to, and I did this the other day, if you were to go to Google and go to their AI search, they would say that the Constitution is a basically non-religious secular document. And I would contend that that is profoundly wrong, that AI's got it wrong, and that Google's put their thumb on the finger or their finger on the scales, and they've tried to decide something for us. I want to talk about how Christianity and some unique things about Christianity allowed us to create this republic where the whole world wants to get here. The whole world wants this. Maybe not the world's governments, the people in control, but the people around the world want to be here, and they want to live in the liberty and prosperity that we have. To help me with this discussion, I've got a friend of mine, a historian, Bill Scott. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. I don't know if you really want to call me a historian. I'd say I have a BS degree, and you can take that however you want.
We can just think of you as BS.
He's making history.
Yeah, a BS degree in useless information. But yeah, I love to dig into the minutia of what created our country.
Oh, amen. So there's some things that are unique about Christianity that, and I think it's fair to say this because what other republic came up around the world where the vote actually means something? I get we got some voting problems. We need to pass the SAVE Act. But where the vote actually means something, where the outcome is still in doubt when we go to vote. You know, that's not the case in China. They have elections. We already know who's going to be elected. Not the case in Russia. We already know who's going to be elected before the election ever starts. They've already decided it. So we've got something special. I think the first thing is that before our revolution in 1730s through the 1770s, there was the Great Awakening. And that preached an idea that instead of having to go to the church to have a relationship with God, you had a personal relationship with God. All of a sudden that meant that the establishment was not needed. If you had a personal relationship with God, then it's not a very big leap to think you've got a place where maybe instead of the king telling you what to do, maybe man could decide it. And then the first thing that I think is unique about Christianity, and the order of these four could change depending on how you value things, but equal justice. Galatians 3.28. That God sees men, women, slave, master, races. They don't really mean anything. They're all the same in the eyes of God, meaning that we're all equal. And that's foundational to what was written in our Constitution. What do you think of that one? You think that's right?
Well, yeah. Jesus acted as if it's up to you to follow him. But if you knock on the door, he'll open it.
Mm-hmm. Well, he doesn't send you to hell.
He didn't say you had to go to the church to get it open. You just let him know that you want in, and he'll be there with you.
Right, because it used to be that Jews and Gentiles were seen as different. And then the New Testament came along, and Jesus came along, and that changed. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
The reason it's a big deal is because now all of a sudden, if you are more directly connected and responsible for your salvation. In other words, you have a choice. Jesus isn't sending you anywhere, but you have a choice. And in the history of mankind, before that, you were essentially ruled by a king. And that king decided what you could do in life. No defining your own destiny. Absolutely no practicing whatever religion you thought was right, because they also told you what to do there. Essentially, we broke down authoritarianism. So for me, that's a foundational thing. Another one is separation of church and state. That doesn't mean that there aren't absolutely rules about, and there are suggestions on how to run a society, how to set up a judgeship, things like that in the Bible. It's that they did not want the state controlling the church, which we enshrined in the First Amendment. But that was preached in this Great Awakening before we had our revolution. It's like they sowed the seeds. Christianity is tolerant. You're supposed to love your neighbor. You're supposed to forgive even sinners. You're supposed to try to bring them towards salvation, rather than the old way is, well, you kill your enemy. You wipe them out. And let's face it, man's flawed. Church is flawed. Not saying it's a perfect record, just saying they're always trying to get you to strive for something better. The final one of those, I think, is free will, where it's not the same as Christianity and free will. It's more like, in practice, the idea of free will, you get to define your own destiny, you get to make your own choices. That portion is being Christian. But if we were to truly define it as Christians, I think it's more that you have the free will to follow God's laws. I think it's gone beyond that in everyday life, and it's beyond just Christians. It's an idea of free will that is tolerant and allows for a different society. Right there, also enshrined in the First Amendment.
Well, now, we were talking about that this Sunday in church. There's several places where it's worded in different ways, but basically there's a phrase of "stand ye in holy places and be not moved." Mm-hmm. Okay. Now that's one concept. You know, you're gonna follow God's laws, and you're gonna defend them, and you're not gonna move, no matter what. Okay. And then the opposite of that is our church is always trying to talk us into not being contentious. Well, how do you fit both of those together?
I don't think you do.
Yeah, well, see, now that's the thing. At the end of Matthew 5, after it's telling you about if somebody steals your coat, you give them your shirt, right? Mm. At the end of that, it says, "Be ye therefore perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect." Okay, now how am I going to do that? I know I'm not perfect, but the idea is to strive for that. Mm. That's what you're working on. You know, if you go take a sacrament, that's the purpose of taking sacrament. You know, I failed you this week. You know, I'm going to try harder. And as long as you keep up that, you're working on making yourself more perfect than you were last week.
And
yet at the same time, you're going to continue to stand in holy places and be not moved.
Well, let's hope. That's a nice thought. But I think that the important thing is both our Constitution and Christianity are about striving for better and being forgiving, being loving, trying to behave in a way that is more in the guidance of God.
Yeah. The second great commandment: "Be ye therefore to love one another as you would love as I love you." And that's
not to be confused with the Second Amendment.
No. Second great commandment. So yeah. Now again, we aren't perfect people. It's hard to do that. But the continual striving for that is the goal.
Absolutely. So the first thing that happened was that they created the right environment, you know, Magna Carta, Scottish Enlightenment, taking us to the Great Awakening, which prepped the American people, I can't say, or the British colonists at that time, for the idea that they should be governing themselves. And now all of a sudden we move to, and I realize I skipped a whole lot of information along there, but I kind of want to spend more time on the Declaration. And that's part of why you're here, because that's one of your favorite documents. How do you think the Declaration set us up for this freedom?
Well,
because it's a list of grievances.
Yes. This is one of the things that I wouldn't use the word upset, but appalled at, that now all of a sudden we've got this big thing that Saturday is 250 years, the Declaration of Independence. They should have started this last year.
At
right?
least.
Yes. I mean, all this was the opportunity for the education department, for all the bureaucracies, to tell the story of how we got here. You mentioned the Magna Carta. You know, have you read it?
Yes, but
it's hard to read.
I'm not saying I understood it. I'm saying I read it.
It doesn't make sense. But because it was written essentially in a different language. It was English, but they talked different. But it was the beginnings in Europe of giving people other than the king rights. Right? Its main purpose was to cut down the power of the king, not to give individual people rights, but it cut down the power of what he could do. And people are aware that existed, but very few have any idea what the story behind it was. Then you kind of went around it. They came here to self-govern. So the next document is the Mayflower Compact. Right? Again, everybody's heard of it. They know what it is.
Maybe.
Very few people have read it.
That one I've never read.
Well, it's a very short document. And its purpose is these people were blown off course. They intended to go to Virginia, and they ended up much further north, and there was no civic authority anywhere around. So they just got together and decided to agree that we will all make the laws that we're going to use and promise to follow them. It's a very simple document, I think 196 words, but 6 times God is mentioned in that. Okay, so these people obviously thought that God was going to be part of them, and they were going to do everything they could to please God.
Well, almost all of them, and there were various religious groups, whether it's Methodist or Presbyterians, etc., that came over, but they all wanted to define their own destiny and be able to worship God the way they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to get away from the powers of Great Britain.
Well, they understood the what's the word I'm thinking? Where they were being persecuted,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, if you weren't doing what the king said,
you were
in every
persecuted.
way, shape, or form, yes.
So when they got here, they wanted to have the freedom to practice their own religion, but they understood the idea that there would be people with other religions, and they didn't want to be in a position where they were persecuted. So there was a very heavy emphasis on Protestant, the various Protestant churches, but they didn't. There were some states where you couldn't be Catholic and become, an officer of the state, but they didn't want to kill you and put you in jail for it either.
No. Well, all of those states had a constitution before we finished the final draft of our constitution. But I think the Declaration came first.
Virginia beat us to it.
Okay.
Yeah. There were a couple of them that had something like a constitution, some way to live. I think the Pennsylvania, they also had some kind of a document that what they were going to allow within their state and so on.
And those people were profoundly religious. Most of them, at the minimum, all of them, you had to be a practicing Christian. Most of them, you had to be an active member of your church, and most of them, you had to swear an oath in order to be any sort of government official.
And they've kind of changed it. You don't have to use the Bible today, but when the president comes up and gives his oath, he does it with his hand on the Bible.
Well, as long as Mondami is not the president.
Well, Who knows? But now, see, this kind of replaced what you were talking about. Up until our declaration, the entire world was run by kings. Very, very little land existed that didn't have a king that claimed ownership of it, and everybody and everything on that land. And he had complete, total control over them.
And there were no middle class to speak of.
Yeah,
There might have been a few lower level
There were
parts.
some exemptions, but you were either an aristocrat or a commoner.
Right.
That was it. There were things like, okay, people talk about the Freemasons. They began as a group of masons, how to build stone buildings. And they wanted to set up a situation where no king could treat them like slaves, like he would everybody else. So if the king tried that, we're not going to build anything for you anymore. Right? So they were separate and complete out of the king's authority. If you wanted a building, we will build it for you, but you can't tell us how to do anything. So there were little groups like that, the guilds, that would keep themselves separate. But 90% of the people that weren't aristocrats were just commoners and at the mercy of the king and the rest of the aristocrats.
Well, that was normal human history.
Yeah.
What's unique is not only did we decide we'd give the power to the people, but when our founding fathers won against Britain, they turned the power over. Washington was offered a kingship. And I strongly believe because of his Christian faith and because of the Great Awakening influences he had that happened, because all of those founding fathers, whether they were young or old, Washington being one of the older ones, not as old as Franklin, were all influenced by those ideas that, you can define your own destiny, that even if you're a deist, your relationship with God was your own and didn't come through the church.
Well,
Not that they didn't expect you to attend church.
What's his name? Will, he used to, one of the commentators that you don't see much anymore, he once had a thing where he said Washington, by making himself dispensable, became indispensable. This idea that he could have taken over and been the king of America. The world expected that. That's how it wasn't. It was expected that that's what was going to happen. We're giving up one King George, we're going to have another one. He insisted, no, that's not why we wrote the Declaration of Independence. As far as I know, I could be wrong, there might be more. I can think in all of human history only two people that did that. Gideon in the Bible and Cincinnatus in Rome, that had the kingship handed to them on a platter and they turned it down. No, God is your king. And nobody else has done that I know of, just those two and Washington. So we were lucky in a great, huge way that Washington was our leader. As a matter of fact, if you think about that, after our declaration, all this idea of kings slowly went away. The French tried it, but they didn't want God to be part of it. Well, that didn't work out very well for them.
That and they had true democracy.
Yes.
Which is mob rule as opposed to a republic, which...
And it was bloody.
Yeah.
Just pure bloody. But consider all the people that led a king's army, or a people's army, that led a people's army to overthrow a king. They did it in Russia, they did it in China, they did it in Cuba, they did it in Venezuela, all kinds of places. Any one of those guys could have held up the Declaration and the Constitution and say, let's do this. It's not a secret.
Well, a whole bunch...
they don't have this marked top secret in some cave somewhere and nobody gets to read it. The whole world knows about those two documents.
Yes,
But
and a bunch of them...
They would have had to give up their personal power to do that.
Agreed. They also... A whole bunch of the democracies around the world call themselves republics, but we're the only place that has the God-given, enshrined, or enumerated rights in the same way that gives more power to the people and less to the government. Those first 10 amendments, in many ways, they define some of the powers of the people, but they also limit the government.
Well, that's the whole purpose.
Yeah.
That was the whole purpose. Madison described our Constitution as the rights of the people are many, the powers of the government are few. He said it in more words, and it was flowerier, but that's the idea. the people have all the rights and the government has very little power. And we've gotten away from that. So
Well, too many politicians now believe that they're essentially little kings.
they
and
want the
queens.
power.
They want the power rather
Yeah.
than they're servants of the people.
Yes. Think of all the things that, where did the right to health care come from? Everybody
There
says
must be
that.
somewhere.
I know, but where? There's nothing anywhere that says that. There's no even hint that that's true. But we've allowed politicians to convince us it's true so that they can take money out of the treasury and give it to somebody they think needs it.
Well,
But
we're
usually,
guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of health care, right?
yeah, at the end, there's a picture up there. I want you to see what the government's doing to just bastardize that phrase. But that's the thing. When they do that, that means they have to take the money from somebody. I mean, free health care, what does that mean? The doctor's got to fix you for free? Well, no, we don't want, we'll just go in there, we'll get taxes and we'll pay him. But we'll give him what we think he should get. And then the guy in the end that gets it, right, he doesn't get but a fraction of the money that came out of the treasury. In the meantime, all the people in the bureaucracy, they pay themselves very handsomely. They also promote how good a job they're doing so that next year they can have more. And there's
Well, with
always
baseline budgeting, they get more.
Yeah.
Baseline budgeting is basically the idea that no matter what you spent last year,
we're going to give you more.
we're going to give you more.
Yeah.
Without actually looking at what is needed.
And in the
No
process,
private industry does this.
No,
Only government.
yes, only the American government. And on the process of this, these people that run this bureaucracy are going to see to it that the politicians that are helping them, they get a chunk of that money for their campaigns. So this is just money that just kind of disappears in the air, and the poor guy at the end, he's not really getting good health care, and he's probably paying more for it than he should have. I'll give you a good example of this, too. When I was working, at one point, the business I worked for changed insurance companies, right, or health insurance. Okay. In the midst of the change, they came and told us that if you have to buy some prescriptions, it's going to take a month or so before you can get your card. So just go ahead and pay for it, and then when the card comes, they'll reimburse you. Keep your receipts, and they'll reimburse. Okay. So I'd been getting some blood pressure medicine, and they'd been charging me $30 every time I go in there. I'd get a 3-month supply, and they'd charge me $30 for that. Okay, so now I go in there, and they say, well, I'm going to have to pay cash, right? Oh, that'll be $6. Whoa, wait. You mean all these years I could have just bought it myself without the insurance? It would have cost $6, but the copay's $30? Why didn't you tell me that? And it's just, that's the thing. This is how they make their money. They just put it some in here, some in there. We get screwed, and everybody in the middle takes all their, gets all the money they want.
Yeah. I'm going to get back to the declaration.
Yes.
That list of grievances, and everybody thinks it's taxation without representation.
Yes.
And guess what? That's number, 14?
17.
17? Okay. Meaning they had a whole lot of things that they were not happy with that had to do with freedom long before they got to taxes. Taxes weren't out of control back then like they are now. There were taxes, but they weren't at the same level.
Yes.
Because the government didn't think it needed to take care of you from the womb to the tomb.
Exactly. When you came here to America from wherever you came from, right? In the late 1800s, the railroads had just put this track all across the middle of nowhere, and now they needed people out there so that they could have an income. So they went all over Europe advertising free land, or you could buy some of their land for cheap, right? And they get you out there for practically nothing. And then you were just left on your own, right? There were a lot of people that came out to the plains thinking they were buying this great, wonderful farmland without realizing it's underneath about 5 feet of sod that they have to dig out by their, by hand. And it took a lot of effort in order to make something that they could live off of. It wasn't easy at all. Nobody gave them anything. So, but your deal about the taxation without representation, if you ask the average person,
There's the number one.
that's the reason. Taxation without representation. It's number 17, actually. The first 13 are variations of they want to tell us how to govern ourselves. They won't let us keep our governor. They want to replace our judges. It just down the list. It just keeps going like that. And I found this is one of my useless information things. In a book called The American Revolution, First-Person Accounts by the Men Who Shaped Our Nation, collected and edited by T.J. Stills. Okay. In this book, there's a little couple of paragraphs that just floored me. In 1842, Mellon Chamberlain, who would go on to become an important historian of the American Revolution, interviewed a 91-year-old Levi Preston. Preston had turned out with other Minutemen on April 19, 1776, to harass the Redcoats sent to seize the munitions at Concord. Okay, so this is our first battle, Lexington and Concord, right? He's in it. And now, many years later, somebody's asking about it. So he was asked, why did you do that? What in the world made you think you could go out there? They had 800 British soldiers with this project, and you guys think you can go out with your hunting rifles and take these guys on? What possessed you to do that? He says, was it the oppression, the Stamp Act, the tea tax, or the writings about the principles of liberty, like Thomas Paine's Common Sense? Preston responded, he wasn't oppressed. He never saw one of those stamps. He didn't drink tea. And the only thing he ever read was the Bible. Well, what made you go to the fight then? He said, young man, we always had governed ourselves, and we always meant to. They didn't mean we should. That was the reason that everybody went out and fought the British, because they were trying to take their ability to govern themselves away from them.
In other words, they tasted liberty and were not about to give
it up. Yes. Even though life was very hard.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that in today's world, we've seen some successes from democratic socialists, also known as the communists in the Democratic Party. And they're about promising everything and destroying America. Folks, it's the 250th. You think you might need to get out there and celebrate this country? You think you might need to get out and learn a little bit more about history? Maybe you should talk to your neighbors and your family and your friends about why we are privileged. We're more privileged than the rest of the world just by the act of being able to sit here. Because we have more prosperity and we have the ability to define our own destiny. So everybody wants all of this great stuff, and it seems like particularly the guilty white liberals, well, they want to destroy it.
Yeah, they
and I
do.
don't get that.
They do. Think about it this way. I would consider the Declaration of Independence the single most important piece of paper ever to come into human civilization. Now, the Bible would outdo it in its impact, but it's a whole series of books. It's all in one book, but it's a bunch of books.
Over 40 years, or 1,500 years.
Yes. The Declaration of Independence is one page. And you start reading, like, when it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. What they meant by that is the rest of the world has its self-evident truth, the divine right of kings. And that ruled the entire world. Basically, what that said is if God didn't want you to be king, he would have stopped you. Mm-hmm. Well, since you made it, well, obviously he must want you to be king. And then just to put the icing on the cake, every time somebody went through the ceremony to officially make them the king, the highest available religious person would put the crown on their head, signifying God, condones this. So follow this guy as your king.
It's almost as if God had ordained the king, and he then became a better than.
He's got the authority.
Greater, well, not just the authority, but he's greater than.
Yes.
He's not a servant in any way. He is the Lord and ruler.
Yes.
And
that's their self-evident truth.
Yeah.
Now we hold these truths to be self. What follows is what we see as the truth, right?
So the
Yep.
list, those first 13 in the Declaration, first 13
What?
that talk about variations of
Well, it's
the complaint, but how they see the world.
well, no, it's the actual phrases of that all men are created equal. Okay, that wasn't said as a racial thing. It was put there to eliminate the difference between aristocrats and commoners. All right, we would all be tried under the same laws. Right? If you were an aristocrat, you didn't get a special law. Okay, everybody was the same. Now, at the same time, when that was said, John Adams said, you can't say that and support slavery. Okay, so it's just, if you want to go by that, then everybody's got to be equal. Okay, then the next part is that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, now, everybody's probably all heard that.
Mm-hmm.
What they don't get, and you'll very rarely find somebody that can answer, what's the next phrase? Right? It comes right after that, and it's probably the most important part of it. To secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Okay? That's the government's purpose, is to secure our rights. It's not to tell us what kind of car to drive, what kind of stove you can have, how much water can come out of your faucet.
So to protect our liberty, not to micromanage us.
Yes. And because we get our rights from God, that's also where we owe our duties. So if all of us are striving to follow the duties of God and to get our rights from them, we don't need much of a government. The government's just there to see that I don't interfere with your rights and you don't interfere with mine.
Bill, we're down to about 12 minutes. You
Okay.
had something else you wanted to show up on the screen?
Well, okay. The very last picture. Can you put that one up? Yeah. This was what was on Shannon Bream's Sunday show
So on Fox News.
on Fox News. I think it was May 31st. Okay. Read that there.
in pursuit
of life, liberty, and happiness. Now that completely bastardizes the whole phrase.
Mm-hmm.
You are guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of you're not guaranteed happiness. It's trying to put happiness along with life and liberty.
Well, but that's what the communists are guaranteeing.
That,
Give us control and you'll have happiness.
now, where is
Own
this?
nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Own nothing,
Yeah,
and you'll be happy.
that will tell you to be happy. That doesn't make you happy.
Well, no, they said so, and if they're in charge, of course that's
Yes.
what's going to happen.
No, the thing is, where do you think that is?
I know the story, but I'm going to let you tell it. It's just
the
depressing.
Smithsonian. They're having a special exhibit of the 250th celebration, and this is what our government officials are trying to change the Declaration of Independence to. That you're in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, as if all three of you're guaranteed happiness. No, you're not guaranteed happiness. You're guaranteed the ability to pursue it.
Well, but if you had free health care, wouldn't you be happy?
Some people are. Some people are. But that's the thing. This document, it changed everything in the world, because it was after this that people started overthrowing their kings. Just think what would happen if Washington didn't win at Trenton. He could have just decided to go back home.
There were many times where we could have lost in the
Yes.
Revolutionary War.
Now, here's the thing, though. January 1st, a week later, most of the soldiers would have had their conscriptions met for a year.
Right.
They'd have gone home. Now, if they'd have gone home and we didn't have that win under our belts, they would have said, we can't stop the British Army. It doesn't matter what we do. They go where they want. We can't even slow them down, right? We don't have any food. We don't have any clothes. We have very little ammunition. People are dying from diseases.
Mm-hmm.
You go home and tell your friends and relatives who's going to want to join that army,
Right.
right? Okay.
Without a win. Basically without hope.
Yes, that's it. It would have been over. They would have captured George, sent him back to England, hung him, right? Any of the other soldiers that they could have round up, they would have done the same thing to.
Though they might not have sent him to England, they probably would have hung him here.
Some would have gone to England. Because
the officers would have.
well, now this is kind of another off the wall story, but when William the Conqueror took over, sedition to the king was the worst crime you could commit. The sentence for that was to be hung, drawn, and quartered. Okay, the main reason for that is when you were quartered, your body was going to be scattered. You weren't going to get a Christian burial. Okay, what they did in the revolutionary times is they would hang you over the river in one of those cages you see on Halloween that kind of look like a human, right? Leaving you in the cage to be eaten up by the crows and the rats, and whatever parts fell off, and again, no burial. So that would have been George Washington's, what would have happened to him. Okay, if that had happened, what would America be? One, we'd have never bought the Louisiana Purchase because the French certainly wouldn't have sold it to the British, right? There wouldn't have been any individual rugged Americans go to Texas to fight the Mexicans for freedom. So Mexico, California, and Texas, Utah, and all that would have remained in the hands of Mexico.
There'd be no middle class. The middle class is an outgrowth.
They'd go right back to kings, aristocrats, and commoners.
Right.
We wouldn't have found the gold.
The Spanish would have eventually.
Eventually. But they had very little interest in the interior of California, so it would have taken many, many years. But they're the ones that would have benefited from that. The British were the first ones to make a steam-powered train, but we caught on to that and passed them up. Their Orient Express can't hold a candle to the New York Central 20th Century Limited or Santa Fe's Super Chief, right? All this stuff that America created would have kind of still happened, but it wouldn't have been any, and
maybe
Europe would have been constant wars all the time like they had been for the last 500-600 years.
I would say only maybe would any of those happen because we rewarded, not the king, meaning you could go out and as you define your own destiny, if you had a great idea, Elon Musk being a great present-day example.
Yes.
He got some help with EV cars from the government to start off with because the government was insisting, but then he built a better product, and then he moved on to SpaceX, and it's turned him into the world's richest man. Now, I see the fact that he's rich, it gives him an obligation in the eyes of a Christian. He has more responsibility to help take care of each other. But that's not through taxes. That's through his own choice.
Yeah. And nobody's making you buy a Tesla. If you want one, you can go out and have it. No, the government isn't and shouldn't be there to tell you you have to or you can't.
Wait, we're sitting in California.
Well,
they tried that real hard. They didn't say Tesla, but they said EV.
Yeah, but they're not getting there.
Well, they are with the mandates over government vehicles like trash trucks here in commie California.
They'll never get there. Nobody can afford it. You can sit there and tell people to do it till you're blue in the face. That they don't have the money. They're just going to give up on the service.
Well, couldn't California? I mean, California doesn't have a revenue problem. We're the fifth largest economy. We have a spending problem.
Yes.
Because in California, at least the voting seems to be done in a way that people are willing to give up their liberty for the warm, fuzzy socialism for security.
Yeah. Until they end up like England and telling you to turn your air conditioner off and your grandmother dies. Now,
well, that's
what's
a
going on.
very real problem in right here in Central California.
Yes. Yes.
And yet, right here, where we're sitting, is one of the centers of California that is red. That also has a big population. You know, there's Orange County, there's San Diego, there's here, the Central Valley. Those are the main spots. There's not much population in all those other red areas of California.
Yeah.
So there's hope. But we have to act. And things like voter ID matter. Can you imagine if we told our founding fathers somebody could sneak over here and not be under this jurisdiction of, meaning they're in what we considered an illegal alien, and now all of a sudden they get to vote in our elections. They had much more stringent laws, like you needed to be a property owner to start off with, things like that. And today, according to the left, you just need to sneak over our borders and you can vote whether you're alive, whether you're dead, as many times as you want here in California without ID.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the problem is coming. We have more people in this country that are takers than there are makers. And when the takers start taking money away from the makers through the government has control of both of them.
Well, thank goodness for Trump, because he stopped a lot of those takers. I get that immigrants that come the right way tend to be some of the most patriotic Americans out there.
Yes.
I know a bunch of them personally.
Yes.
They are profoundly interested in maintaining the liberty we've got. But the people that just sneak over and jump on welfare, or here in California get free medical care, and I don't mean free emergency medical care. California's given it to them through Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
So we're importing takers while, because of government policies here in California, we're driving out people that are taxpayers. Productive citizens are being run out. Gavin did everything he could to make sure that it was difficult for Elon, so he left. For Meta, that jerk at Facebook, Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
You know, the guy that's now pretending like he's a little bit conservative, but he's basically a little communist. Or maybe he's seen the light. I hope so. They did everything they could. You realize that BP Oil spent $2 billion to get out of its deal so it could get out of California because it couldn't handle the regulation? Fifth largest economy, a major corporation that was producing oil and gas that we need, and it got out at the price of $2 billion because it was cheaper to do business elsewhere because California's nuts.
Yeah.
And yet I have friends that tell me that Gavin's a good person.
Well, I think you were probably there when it was brought up. We go to the Clovis City Council meetings most of the time. And there was a developer out there that came there one night, and he pointed out that for every house he builds, every single one, there's a $30,000 fee he gives to the city of Clovis, or possibly Clovis in California and the county. I'm not sure what. But he spends $30,000 on a fee that's not for anything. It's not like he's putting sewers in the ground. It's not like he's doing the streets or the curbs or anything. This is just the fee for each house. Now, the Democrats keep talking about affordability. Well, if you want to try and promise people affordability, but then you go out and you tax the daylights out of them, your affordability just went out the window.
Yep. Well, we're down to about a minute. So, Bill, final thoughts, and then I'm going to have a couple final thoughts.
Well, I would love it if people would start looking into the Declaration of what. There's a whole bunch of stuff I've got here that's just so interesting that if you took just a few minutes, go to Google, ask it a couple questions, and you'll find some of the most amazing things about this declaration, and it changed the world.
I'm going to end with giving you several resources. Anything by David Barton. I like talking about the history of our country. Patriot Academy, Rick Green. You could go to the American Heritage series. That's David Barton. You could go to a lot of things by PragerU and learn. I just came across a new one, Faith and Freedom, by the Herzog Institute. Great series. They're about 5 minutes each, so you can listen to them in your car and then take a break and listen to some music and move back to learning something. There are more opportunities in today's world with the digital divide to get out there and learn about this country. There's also great opportunities because there's going to be celebrations. They've already started. Get out there. Let freedom ring, folks.
Definitely.
This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist. I thank you for this time. I thank you, BS, for coming and joining me.
Clear. You what? Where did it go? Yeah, I know. I didn't get to do any of the things I was thinking.